Great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this Accessible Zoom meetings webinar or training that we're hosting today. My name is Sam. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Participation and Development Coordinator at the Youth Affairs Council Victoria, or YACVIC as we are commonly known. It's an exciting afternoon that we have today. We are live streaming through Facebook, and this webinar will be recorded as well. So what I'll ask is that everybody can turn off their videos if they're not speaking. It helps to save your bandwidth, which should improve the quality of the call today for you, and also means that you won't be seen in the live stream. So you should have a little poll that's up in front of you and the little welcome slide as well. It's great to have so many people here interested to hear about this incredibly important topic, always important, but particularly important at the moment with the way that so many of us have adapted to working online. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all sitting. I'm living and working on Boonwurrung country. I live Bayside down towards Frankston. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also extend that respect to anybody in the call here today who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And I'd also like to note that sovereignty was never ceded and that we are living on, working on and profiting from what is stolen land. And the incredible ongoing connection to country that exists today for First Nations people. And I would also like to just quickly introduce you to an awesome piece of participatory art that was created by the Koori Youth Council, their Koori Youth Summit, which is the largest gathering of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young Victorians each year. This year they've held it online, but previous years it's been in person. And this was a great piece of participatory art that was created on the great wings of Bunjil sit the hopes and the dreams of young and emerging leaders. So we are not able to access our office at the moment. This is sitting proudly in our board room in Melbourne. Great to have so many of you here today. We are live streaming through Facebook and it will be recorded to be shared afterwards. So what I'm encouraging everyone to do is if you're not speaking or interpreting, I'd ask you to turn your camera off so that you're not seen in the recording of the video. I work for the Youth Affairs Council Victoria. We are the peak body for young people and the sector that supports them in Victoria. Our work is about raising the voice of young people within policy and advocacy and supporting the sector that works with them as well. We are going to hear from Melissa Hale, who works for DARU. She's been delivering these great presentations for a long time and has a lot of wisdom and experience to share with us, which is fantastic. But before I hand over to my colleague, Mia, who's also going to introduce herself, I just wanted to end the poll and see what those results are. So if you just want to finish off completing that poll, if you've just joined us, we've got a few late arrivals. Welcome to you. I'll give you another 10 seconds or so, and then I'm going to end the poll and just have a quick look at who we've got here today. So I'm going to end it now. And I can share those results. I don't think the results come through on the live stream, so I'll read them out as we go for those that are following on Facebook or seeing this on YouTube after the fact. We have the majority of people here today are working with young people, and then we have a few young people and students on board today. In terms of accessibility, the majority of people are pretty confident, but we've got a few that are new and a few that feel super confident, which is great for us to know as well. The majority of people working at youth services or community organisations. We have a small number from disability services, school and local government as well. And then the makeup of those here today, most are working in service delivery or support work. And then we have a small number in management and senior leadership, A few people have clicked other, and so they may have put them in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It's a great tool that we have during this digital age, is that we can network and participate and listen at the same time, which is pretty great. Those that are working here today are working with the majority 18 to 25-year-olds, and a small number working with 12 to 17-year-olds also. And then the last question, most people are multitasking, it doesn't surprise me. You do you today. Feel free to do what works for you. I'm working from home and I can hear my kids running around outside, so apologies if they are heard at any point. A few people are also distracted by their cats, dogs or frogs, which is great. And then a couple of others juggling care, responsibilities and daydreaming, which is nice. So I'm going to stop sharing those results now. What I will do in just a moment is hand over to my colleague, Mia Gwynn, who works at the Youth Disability Advocacy Service. We'll then hear from Melissa at DARU. She's going to talk us through her presentation, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So during the presentation, feel free to use the chat box to pose questions, and then after the presentation, we'll open the floor up for questions. And so Mia and Melissa will be answering questions, and then we will wrap up and all be away and back to our busy schedules at 1 o'clock. So that's enough from me for now. I'll pop up again after Melissa's presentation, but for now I'll pass over to Mia.
Hello everybody, my name is Mia Gwynn. Thanks so much, Sam, for the introduction. I am the manager at the Youth Disability Advocacy Service. It's an organisation that works under YACVIC, the Youth Affairs Council Victoria, and my pronouns are she and her. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which I am meeting on, the YDAS, which is about 4 hours northwest of Melbourne, near Swan Hill in rural Victoria. So I am really pleased to have Melissa here today and looking forward to her presentation as to best how we could set up the most accessible Zoom meetings. I know that over the last few months, we've been on a very steep learning curve for everybody with all the technology implemented with the video conferencing. And so it's really timely to have Melissa here to share a wealth of knowledge in regards to accessibility for disabled participants and ensuring that meetings are accessible for everybody. Melissa is the coordinator at the Disability Advocacy Resource Unit, or DARU for short. And if you're unfamiliar with the organisation, there is a link in there. They are coordinated with VCOS as well, and her role is to support and provide resources for 24 different disability advocacy organisations throughout Victoria. She provides professional development, training, as well as resource development, and works as a disability advocate herself. So now I would like to hand over to Melissa. So Melissa can introduce herself more. And we look forward to the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mia for a very long time now. So it's really lovely to work with her again. So hi everybody, thank you for joining us today. It's really pleasing to see you all here taking an interest in ensuring that your meetings are inclusive. I just wanted to let you know that this is a safe space. So it's okay not to know everything. And if you feel like you want to ask a question and you feel a bit, is this question a bit too weird, or is this question going to make me look a bit silly? Please don't feel that way. We've all heard it all before and it's really okay. So I want to make sure that this space, you know that this space is a safe space. No question is too silly, and please ask those questions. It is a good idea to ask the questions in the chat box so that we can make sure that we get to your questions at the end of the presentation. So a little bit about why we are doing this. So, as Mia said before, I am the coordinator of the Disability Advocacy Resource Unit, and we are a team of just three people. And we are a small team within the larger team at VCOS, which is the Victorian Council of Social Services. So our role primarily is to resource and support 24 different disability advocacy organisations with a number of different needs, mostly relating to professional development, training, resources, information sharing, and all the other different needs. One of these organisations is the Youth Disability Advocacy Service. So of the three of us, two of us have disabilities. I'm a deaf person and my colleague has a vision impairment. So the whole of VCOS, which is around 27 staff, don't have any other disabilities. When I first started 4 years ago, it was clear that myself and my colleague were running into a number of different barriers in the workplace when we were trying to do our job. Me, because I couldn't hear certain things, and my colleague because she couldn't see certain things. So our team at VCOS knew that this wasn't okay, and our CEO, Emma King, mandated that we set up an inclusion committee that will address these barriers and actively work as a whole organisation to remove them. We were doing a great job starting at this work, then COVID-19 hit and everything changed. One of the things we were actively working on was things like the staff meeting in the boardroom and making sure that everyone could hear and see what was going on. So when I do my inclusion training, I feel like the best way to learn inclusion is to put yourself in the shoes of the person you are thinking about. So I want you to think about this for a deaf and vision impaired perspective. So we'll do the deaf perspective first. I want you to think about this. Imagine yourself sitting at a board table with 27 people. They are all talking in a foreign language. You only know a little bit of this language, but because they are all speaking so quickly and fluently, you have no idea what they are saying. They look at you to ask you a question, but you don't know what the question is. You only know they are watching and waiting for an answer. You indicate that you can't understand them, and they sigh, brush it off, and tell you not to worry about it and move on. How do you think that would make you feel? So let's think about this from the person with the vision impairment perspective. Imagine you're sitting at that same board table with 27 people, and the room is pitch black with the lights off, the curtains are drawn, and only bits of sunlight is breaking up the black. The room is clearly full of people, and you know this because you can just make out the shadows of people sitting around. And you can hear them all talking about how it's Robert's 30th birthday, and a scramble of voices chattering about how he got a new car for his birthday. Someone must have noticed you and called out, "Hey Jan, have a seat." But you don't know where the seats are, who's in the room, or if there's even birthday cake. So just thinking about those two scenarios and how you might feel in those shoes, the barriers they present, they are the most accurate ways to make people with good hearing and good sight try to imagine what the barriers must feel like. When we feel those barriers, we intrinsically start to empathise and understand what needs to happen to remove those barriers. Yeah. So as a team at VCOS, we started to work on trying to remove those barriers from our boardroom. So that's the background. So I'm here today to teach you a few tricks and tips about making Zoom inclusive for deaf and hard of hearing and vision impaired people primarily. When COVID hit, we knew that we had to flip things around a bit and use different types of technology to communicate with each other, like I'm sure you all are. So we sort of used those same principles online. So the tips I'm about to give you, you will be well placed to adopt many of these anyway, even if you're not working with deaf or vision impaired people, because it's simply good manners and good inclusive practice for anyone. So first I'll start with some tips for deaf people. It's important to note, not all deaf people are created equal. Some deaf people like me speak for themselves and use captioning and interpreters for you to make sure that they can hear you. In real life, my biggest barrier is if I can't see your face. So if I was to meet you for the first time online on Zoom, I would most likely need captioning in case I can't lip read you for some reason. However, some deaf people rely on Auslan interpreters to both hear and speak. So it's like a wide spectrum. And many deaf people need different things or a combination of different things. So it's really important to ask what they need, then follow through. And this is the same for any disability. The first important rule is to ask what a person needs and follow through. Never assume you know. So the first thing I'll cover is enabling lip reading. Turn on your video, not right now, but when you're having a Zoom meeting with someone, it's really important to keep your video on. I promise I'm not looking at your messy hair or clothes or messy house. I'm simply just reading your lips and watching your body language and facial expression when you are speaking, because they are important cues to understand what you are saying. When you're not talking, put yourself on mute. The reason for this is because when you are lip reading on Zoom, you're using the active speaker mode. So when someone is talking, a yellow box appears on the screen and the person's face fills the screen, and it's easier to lip read. If you're not on mute and you make a tiny noise, the screen will change to a different speaker who's not actually speaking, so it'll really disrupt the process of trying to lip read. If a deaf person is facilitating the meeting, the best way to help is to put your questions in the chat box so they can read them as they go along. Alternatively, use the raise hand button under participant list. I'll just use it now so you can show you what you mean. So you go down to participants, you click that, and then there's a little button that says raise hand, you click that, and a little hand will come up on your screen. So the person who is facilitating knows that you've got your hand up and you would like to say something. That is a really useful tip. Another thing that's really important to remember is lip reading is very hard work for a deaf person. So unless a deaf person themselves is okay with it and prefers it, please don't ask them or expect them to rely on it. A deaf brain takes a lot longer to get used to new voices, your internet speed, and your face patterns when your voices are microseconds slower than your face movement online, and to make sure that they will be able to understand all of you when you're not directly in front of you. So in my case, I prefer to lip read. However, it took me about 6 weeks to get used to lip reading online. And through that time, I had to rely on an Auslan interpreter to help until I could cope with it, because my brain uses around 5 times more energy listening and conversing than a person with normal hearing. For meetings where I've had to take notes and remember things, I still use live captioning so I can concentrate on just listening and conversing, because performing just one other task is impossible. This is very much the same thing for all deaf people, whether they use Auslan interpreted captioning, just concentrating on that communication aspect, then doing another task can be really, really difficult. So with captioning and interpreting, I'll just go through that. Sometimes deaf people need Auslan interpreters, captioning, or both for your meetings. Always check first what a person needs and just follow through. Don't rely or trust on automatic captioning that some online platforms have. So I believe Microsoft Teams or Google Meet have some form of automated voice recognition captioning, which almost always is inaccurate. It's not recommended, so go for a proper provider. Captioning can be done in two ways. It can be done through a closed captioning box in the bottom of the Zoom screen, or through a separate web link, which you can click and open it up on a separate screen. The way I do it is I provide the attendees with a link to view the captions on a separate screen, because that way you can Zoom on one device and read the captions on another device, and everyone prefers different things. If you're going to have captions straight into your Zoom meeting, you need to give the caption provider what's called an API token. So in the closed caption box on the bottom, when you're organizing the Zoom meeting, there will be a thing called copy API token. You give that to the captioner provider, and then they will be able to help you organize it from there. So when you book and use interpreters in Zoom, you provide the booking agency and interpreter with the Zoom link, and they will dial into the conversation and interpret like they're in the room, just like you can see today. The deaf person can pin the interpreter to the screen so that all they see is the interpreter when the conversation is happening. So when the interpreter is swapped every 15-20 minutes, the deaf person unpins that interpreter and pins the other interpreter on, so they can watch the interpreters through the session. So I should probably tell you this now. You don't need to write all this down, because I will send all this information in a follow-up email through Sam. So sorry if you've already written all this down. So now we'll move on to vision impairment. The most important thing is to make sure you do ensure that everyone knows who is in the room. Not everyone can see who is in the meeting. Just think, when you're in a teleconference, you cannot tell who is in the call, who is speaking next, and what people's body language is like. For someone who has a vision impairment, remember, it is like that all the time. So you need to be aware of this, and as a general rule, it's just really good inclusive meeting practice. So the best way to navigate this is, the chair of the meeting should do a roll call at the beginning of each meeting. So the easiest way to do this is to go to your participant list and say, so here we have Anne, Joe, Jack, Jane, and so on. Like in a teleconference, make sure you say your name when you speak. However, this happens quite a lot. When you say who is speaking, it's not necessary to say who is speaking every single time. Consider this dialogue. So if I'm having a conversation with my colleague Natasha, and I say, Melissa speaking, so Natasha, can you tell me how to get into the update this week? And Natasha says, Natasha speaking, just go into box A and click line B. Melissa speaking, thanks for that. That's crap. That's really cumbersome and unnatural. It doesn't feel like a natural conversation, does it? But it's okay to just acknowledge once what's happening and who the speakers are. Like, for example, Melissa speaking, so Natasha, can you tell me how to get into the update this week? Just go into box A and click line B. Thanks. So you've already acknowledged that the conversation is happening between Melissa and Natasha, and you can just flow on with the conversation. You don't need to say their name every single time you speak, as long as it's clear who is having the conversation. It's a habit that takes practice, but once you practice, you get used to it. Having a chair of a meeting who knows who wants to speak next makes the job quite easy. So if I'm chairing a meeting, I might say, Natasha, you want to speak next? And then after Natasha, I'll go to Sarah, and then I'll go to Joe. So that way you're directing who's going to speak next, and it's easier for someone with a vision impairment to follow that. Zoom also works really well with screen reader software for people with vision impairment, so it's easier for people using screen reader to navigate online. But if you want to show PowerPoint or any other reading material, it's still really important and really worthwhile to email this to the vision impaired person before the meeting and not in PDF. PDF is not accessible to vision impaired people, so make sure you always send a Word version or PowerPoint. Using active speaker mode is also really helpful for those with vision impairment who also have some vision, to be able to see the person's outline and feel like they're having a face-to-face conversation. So again, really important to keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking, because it can throw things a bit if the speaker keeps jumping around. So before I wrap up, my last message is, if you do get it wrong, don't panic. It's really important to just try and then try again. The more you embed this into your normal meeting practice, it will become like a muscle memory. It's okay to make mistakes. Don't try to over-apologize and feel really bad within yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. Just if you do make a mistake, just stop. Sorry, next time, just try and fix it. So I think that's it for me. I will send some resources for extra reading if you're interested, as well as these instructions that you've just learned today. And yeah, thank you. Good luck.
Great, thank you so much, Mel. It was a really insightful presentation. It's so great to have your personal kind of lived experience blended through with your professional experience and those of your colleague, and it's just so nice to be able to hear you make it so personal as well, and putting us in the position of needing to consider what it's like, what the experience can be, was really powerful as well. So thank you so much for that. I'm spending personally a lot of time of my time on Zoom, delivering network meetings and webinars and forums and training, and some of these things are shamefully not things that I've particularly thought of before. So I really appreciate you coming here to give us your insights and give us so much to think about as well. One of the great, one question that came up in the chat box there was from Catherine, who's our CEO at YACVIC. So unsurprisingly, she's thinking about advocacy. She's mentioned is there advocacy going on with Zoom and Teams and other platforms around changing the systems to be able to pin multiple people, for interpreters, etc. Do you hear anything about that? Is there any kind of coordinated approach to put pressure on these companies to do better with their accessibility?
So what accessibility, sorry, what accessibility for which? Can you repeat the question, sorry?
Yeah, of course. So the question is around some of the challenges around pinning or viewing interpreters and speakers at the same time. We've experienced it today through our live stream, partly because we're using the meetings format rather than the webinar format. But obviously, this is the experience that people have when they're in the meetings format. Do you know if there's any coordinated advocacy going on to put pressure on those tech companies to do better at this stuff and make some of those functionality more flexible?
Not that I know of in terms of coordinated advocacy efforts, but more of a look, like it's sort of like, it's funny because when COVID hit, it's like groups of people with disabilities, and I know that Mia can probably agree with this as well, particularly with deaf people. You sort of start testing different platforms and sharing amongst ourselves, okay, which ones work best for us, which ones are accessible. I know that our team straight away said, okay, which ones are more accessible, which ones are going to work for us best, and then we just sort of recommended just those ones. So it was more like that people power, purchasing power that goes towards, like, we're just going to use this. One thing that that is interesting, one thing that our disability advocates are finding is a preference towards using Zoom for people with disabilities to have their planning meetings with NDIA planners, because Zoom is a lot more accessible, but the NDIA is saying, no, we're only going to use Microsoft Teams. So there's that kind of little bit of advocacy there saying, well, Teams is not accessible for us, we need to use Zoom. So in terms of coordinated advocacy, it's still very early days, but little things like that are happening. So whether it happens in the future or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I wonder whether it's about us, you know, writing a piece on it or making some comments on social media. You know, those are the sort of things that big companies take note of, aren't they? And I know that you can give feedback, obviously, after meetings. The little stars pop up and you can say how good the quality was, and I'm pretty sure there's a link there to give feedback as well. I'm wondering if Mia is able to jump in. Mia, is there anything that you wanted to feedback or respond to some of the things Mel was talking about?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. I suppose I do have a comment. In my role, I am managing the Disability Advocacy Service, and we're working a lot with a variety of different stakeholders and a variety of young people. And I suppose it's interesting from my experience over the last few months, seeing those sorts of clashes with accessibility requirements. And one example of that could be a young person who is on the autism spectrum, and background noise is quite distracting for this person. In these Zoom meetings, when we're working out how best to, you know, work out some procedures or etc. Once we're in the Zoom meeting with a person who might be blind, who hasn't had their mic muted, but they need the screen reader to be able to hear what's going on, so it can be a bit of an echo. And so the other participant, their access requirements are at a bit of an odds with that. So working out how to best mitigate and manage those variety of accessibility needs is challenging. And disabled young people are fantastic at working together and providing that feedback and supporting one another, of course. So we have been successful in navigating these challenges. But the approaches isn't always best practice, but the approach that we use needs to work for everybody. So Melissa, I wonder if you could fill me in on some of your learnings, because that would be very valuable for our future meetings, because we see these situations come up again and again. And obviously the new norm is being spoken about, and we need to ensure that people's access requirements can be equitable for everybody.
Mel, did you have any thoughts on that particularly?
Here's me teaching you how to use Zoom, and I forgot to unmute myself. Interesting. So it's interesting. It brings back so many things, because one of the things that we set up when COVID hit was a network for disability advocates to come together every 2 weeks to talk about some of the common issues that are coming up in this environment, and particularly meeting with people with disabilities online, and what are some of the, you know, issues they're finding with that. And a lot of what Mia has said is correct, just trying to get people used to using an online platform, particularly if they need to be face-to-face with people, has been a real challenge. The extra time it takes for people to learn how to use this new online thing, even things like, because we know that people with disabilities are often below the poverty line, there's people who can't afford devices. And the NDIA has stepped up and said, okay, we're going to try and fund devices in a bit more of a flexible way, but they're not going to fund things like internet connections or increased data. So it's become quite expensive to be able to do like a video call and stuff like that. So while we can work on making Zoom accessible, as we can, there still remains a problem. There's so many people with disabilities, particularly those with the most needs, are still unable to access this because of the most basic thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, great.
And if I could add to that, just in relation to Melissa's comment there, that inequality, I suppose, we have had that in the community prior to COVID hitting, and that's still an ongoing issue. It hasn't been erased by COVID. So that dynamics and the power dynamics, regardless of whether that's happening in Zoom or whatever platform that might be occurring on. And unfortunately, disabled people are quite used to sucking it up and having to educate people before they've arrived to a new meeting, a new organization. And it does take a lot of energy, and it's exhausting to educate people on their accessibility needs. And here in Zoom, it's not the only place that would happen. Going to a reference group, I know from my own personal experience, there's a list of requirements that etiquette that I need to ensure people do, such as not blocking the interpreter and etc. So it does become very exhausting. And I think it clearly shows that power dynamics and that additional responsibility that disabled people have to take on to educate people. So I suppose I ask the question of the audience here, it's so important for you to learn these skills, take in what Melissa's said, and not everything needs to be perfect, but it's important to be able to alleviate some of that onus on disabled people when they're coming to your meetings or whatever platforms you might be meeting them in.
I couldn't agree more, Mia, and that's why it is so important when you are doing inclusive practice. You need to put your shoes in the person you're trying to assist. So like these scenarios I gave you at the beginning, try to imagine what it might be like for that person, and then that will straight away give you that empathy and understanding. Okay, this is the barriers I might experience. These are the barriers I need to remove, and that will trigger off the thought of how am I going to fix, how am I going to try and remove those barriers? And that learning by feeling is the best way to remember how to do inclusive practice.
Mel, I have a question from the work that I do and the conversations that I have across the sector with people working with young people particularly, is how do I respectfully ask about someone's disability status or what support they might need? So when I'm creating a participant registration form or that kind of thing, do you have any specific advice or guidance or resources that can help with that?
With young people especially, it can be quite difficult because often young people are going through that sort of identity crisis. I know I didn't accept myself fully as a deaf person until I was about 18, 19. Before that, it was all trying to hide the fact I was deaf. So I can imagine that being a young person, there is all that identity development happening as well. So you need to be quite sensitive to that. Now, I also, in my personal life, I also work a lot with cricket, with developing deaf people in cricket, men and women and girls and boys. And I work a lot with cricket coaches. And that is a question they also ask, how do we ask, how do we support deaf and hard of hearing teenagers in a mainstream cricket club? And you can imagine a group of 12 boys, teenage boys, and one deaf person that doesn't want to speak up and say, I can't hear what's going on. You have to develop that rapport with the person, develop that rapport with the person, develop that relationship. Ask them on the side, just sort of say, what can I do to help you? I know that you're struggling with hearing this, or you're struggling to say this, and don't ask them in front of everybody else. You know, ask them on the side, what can I do to make this better for you? Another tactic is to sort of promote inclusive practice to everyone. Just say, we're in, like, this is a cricket club example, we're an inclusive club, we're about it, accepting everybody, you know, that kind of thing. So promote inclusiveness for your whole group, and then always take the person aside and say, what can I do to help you separately in a respectful way that they feel safe to be able to disclose. That would be my advice.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mel. Mia, did you have any thoughts on that question particularly as well, around how to ask respectfully, either before or once you've started to create that relationship with a young person about their support needs?
I have to agree with what Melissa has said. It is really important to establish that rapport and ensure that everybody has trust, and ensure that inclusion is just ingrained and enmeshed within the organization, and that people can feel safe. Then they're happy to bring up anything about their access needs. And I suppose something I could add, which is just a small tip, I suppose, when people are organizing an event, regardless of whether that be on Zoom or face-to-face, when you're setting up those registration forms, it is really important to ask if people need any particular access needs. Have a dedicated field that is there asking people about any particular requirements that they might have. And that means that you're able to capture a lot of that information at the point of registration. But also means that you're able to prepare in advance before those meetings occur. So you're not on the spot trying to struggle to fill those access needs when it's happening.
Yeah, fantastic. That's such a great tip. And it seems so simple, doesn't it? And once you start doing it, I think it can become just part and parcel of the questions you ask. I do think there's potentially a bit of a vulnerability in that question, in asking. I personally think that sometimes it can feel quite exposing to ask what support somebody might need and then not know necessarily how you respond. So if you're not confident or consistently working with young people with disability, I think there can be a vulnerability in asking that question, because it can expose what you don't know. And that sense of feeling uncomfortable with that, I think is such a huge part of this, about getting better at creating accessible environments. I don't know if that's something either of you, maybe Mel first, is that something you've thought about or spoken to people about before, Mel?
Not particularly, but let me think. Like, everybody will always be at different points in their journey. Everyone has different confidence levels. Everyone's personality is different, whether they will know how to self-advocate. It all depends. It all depends on the person. But if you create an environment with a young person where they feel comfortable to be able to tell you that they need something, then I think that's half the battle. And if they feel like they can tell you, oh, I need this extra support, and you're not going to make it a thing. Like, sometimes the worst thing is making it a big deal and just, you know, I mean, some of the worst things that used to happen to me is at school, for example, the teacher would make an absolute example of how well I was listening, even though I'm deaf, kind of thing. You know, that's the worst thing you can do to a young person. So if you are able to do that respectfully, then I think that's half the battle. That's just my opinion anyway.
Yeah, great. Mia, was there anything that you wanted to add on this topic? And no worries if not, we have got some other questions coming through, but just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, there is something I could add actually. I suppose working with disabled young people, it is really valuable to have peer role models. For example, when we provide workshops and events, we always have them facilitated by a disabled young person. What that means is that the disabled young person is able to feel a sense of belonging, feel like they're learning something from somebody who's a peer. They're also able to self-reflect and learn about what the language and they need to use and what requirements they have to explain to people.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, peer-led, youth-led, role model environments help to create those safe spaces for young people to navigate together, and opens up that whole conversation of accessibility in a whole new way. I love that. Great. We've got a couple of questions coming in through the chat box. Jane Hickey's asked, is it preferable to ask for information regarding barriers to access and inclusion rather than support needs? The latter feels more aligned with the medical model of disability.
I think if I wouldn't worry too much about the language when you're asking, like if you're asking on a form, right, then you would just say, do you have any accessibility needs? I think that's pretty okay. But I think when you're planning an event or a forum or something, it's better to focus on inclusion rather than access. This is the difference. Access is simply providing an accessible point so that a person can get there. But inclusion is about creating a space where everybody, disability or not, has the same experience. I'll give you an example. I went to the AFL Grand Final parade, okay? And they had this big closed off area next to the stage with a path where people could wheel their wheelchairs down, but they had all these wheelchairs parked like it was a parking garage. And they had stuck all these people with wheelchairs in this path. They had all the people who wanted to see the Auslan interpreter stuck in between the wheelchairs so they could see the interpreter on the stage. They had blind people stuck next to them. They were all just caged in this little cage. Is that access? Yes. Because you have got them there. You have ticked the box that you have given people access. But is that inclusion? No. It's not inclusion because they're not having the same experience as everybody else. Everybody else, like people who are able-bodied, are able to get up and go to the toilet when they want to, able to sit where they want to, or stand where they want to. A person in a wheelchair can't. Once they're parked, they're stuck there. So that's not inclusion. So when you are organising an event or a forum or something, focus on inclusion. Try and make it so that a person with a disability with access needs has the same experience as the person who doesn't. It's not just about ticking the box saying I've provided access. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think it directly speaks to what I think I was trying to ask before, but couldn't get the words out quite right. And I think what you've spoken to there is exactly it. And it takes me also back to Mia's point that if you had people with disability on the design team or the delivery team, you know, at that event, that never would have happened because nobody with disability would ever think like that. And so it speaks exactly to where participation and where peer-led comes into its own. Great, I've just seen another question in the chat there from Daniel. I agree, don't make an example of it or make inspiration porn out of people just because of their disabilities. It's an example of ableism. So yeah, thank you, Daniel. Oh, I missed a question from Catherine as well. We've spoken about sight and hearing impaired people and neurodiverse people. Are there other needs for other groups that we need to be aware of for online accessibility? And or have you heard much about how schools are ensuring online learning is accessible for students? So maybe we'll think about the first question first, about outside of hearing and sight impaired people and neurodiverse people, are there others that we need to be considering?
Absolutely. Like for example, there's the issue of people with cognitive disability. I suppose the thing I would add to what I've already said is you need to allow extra time. So if you're working with a person with a cognitive disability who needs to attend an online appointment of some kind, you need to allow a lot of extra time for them to be able to process information from getting onto the actual computer app or getting onto Zoom and getting through the appointment and understanding what's happening and processing the information. You need a lot of extra time. It's always advisable to have a support person with them. And it's always advisable to have someone, like a support person, help them navigate how to work Zoom. So those are the sort of things. And also things like the normal thing that you would consider when working with someone with a cognitive disability, like the breaking down of language, making sure you use plain or easy English. Use the same things on Zoom. Just make sure you use that sort of thing. So I think that one's about it. The other question, I'm sure there are others. I don't claim to be an expert in absolutely every disability. No one can be, but always go back to the one key thing you must remember. Always ask what a person needs. Ask what they need, then follow through, and then that person is always an expert in themselves and what they need. In terms of schools, I'm hearing varying stories about accessibility in schools. Some have been good, some have been bad, but I haven't really heard that much about that.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Mia, did you have anything to add to either of those questions?
Thank you. So I might just add a little bit to Melissa's comment. So really what we can do to help inclusion in meetings or different assignments is really including an agenda beforehand so that all of that information is available, ensuring that everybody is on the same page and equipped when they arrive at that meeting. They've had time to digest the information, and that way it puts everybody on a level playing field so that people with disabilities are able to be involved in that meeting just as anybody else would. It means that all groups of people are really able to contribute. People who are on the autism spectrum really require that additional preparation lead-in time. So providing that agenda ahead of time ensures that there isn't any power dynamics at play when that time arrives to contribute.
Great. Thank you, Mia. Yeah, really, really great points and such easy things to do. We've got another question Daniel's asked in the chat. Mel, using that example of the parked wheelchairs, how could they have done things differently to focus on inclusion instead of just accessibility? I know some events have a specified accessibility space where there are special seats near the front, so deaf people have full view of the interpreter. It seems maybe an interpreter on screen or captioning would be more inclusive.
Well, okay, so in that real life example, that actually did happen, sadly enough. What would have been better is instead of that little sectioned off area, they could have made the area a lot bigger. So maybe 4 times it's bigger, and 4 times it's bigger. If I show you photos of that area, and in my face-to-face training, I have photos of the area. 4 times bigger is not that much bigger. Like, it's not a huge amount of space. If they had, like, the whole front of the stage, if they had made that whole section, like a bit of that section, like wheelchair friendly, like that special matting they put on the ground so that wheelchairs can go over it, the people in wheelchairs could have gone with their families. They would have been able to easily go in and out. Another thing about that sectioned off area, there was the same size sectioned off area next to it that had barely any people in there, and that was for VIPs. There was literally 3 people standing around looking really awkwardly at all these packed wheelchairs. That should have just been removed. The VIPs should have been put somewhere else. So making that area bigger so that more wheelchairs could have been with people with their families rather than families being pushed back. People could have moved around a bit better. That would have made so much more difference. There was an Auslan interpreter there on the stage. The Auslan interpreter could have been put on the screen picture in picture, so that a deaf person could have gone anywhere and stood anywhere and being able to see it on screen, not a very hard thing to do either. So just those tiny little things, and like you were saying, Sam, if a person with a disability was on that organising committee, those small little things would have been picked up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we're getting towards the end of our hour together, folks. If you've got one last question, feel free to pop it in the chat now. If you need to duck off in the next couple of minutes, please do complete the evaluation form. There's only a couple of questions, and it really helps us to understand what we're doing well and what we can do better at. I've put in the chat box there a link to our events page, the YACVIC events page. We have webinars and training and opportunities coming up all the time for workers and for young people as well. Oh, on that, Mia, did you want to talk about emerging young leaders quickly? Would you like just to introduce emerging young leaders?
I'd love to, thank you. So YDAS, the team that I'm working for are providing a program called Emerging Young Leaders. And that's really focusing on people with disabilities, young people with disabilities who have, will be providing a series of workshops to those people. So they will have four different events this year that we've been organising. So all of those events will be held on Zoom. They will all be held online. So that program will be available to all, co-designed by young people with a disability, really making sure that it is inclusive for everybody, rolled out online so that it is also fully accessible. So we're really excited about rolling out those workshops. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much, Mia. And a huge thank you to Melissa as well. It's been so informative. I really look forward to seeing those resources that you'll share with us, partly for myself as much as anything, but also to pass on to everybody who's registered for the webinar today. So if you had colleagues or you know people that you think should be watching this, and I'm sure you can think of some, please do share the information that we send out in the next week or so. The live stream has happened on Facebook and will stay on there as well, but we'll also upload it on YouTube. So that will happen after today. So another huge thank you to Melissa and to Mia, and please keep in touch. We've got other events coming up, and we'd love to see you at them. So thank you, and we will stop live streaming now. And those that need to go, you feel free to leave the meeting now. And yeah, let us know if you've got any questions after today. Feel free to drop us an email. Mia and Melissa, if you just want to stay on the call, we'll have a quick kind of debrief after everyone's gone back to their lives. Thanks so much, folks. Great to have you all here. A few thanks coming in. And yeah, I've got a comment from the captioner saying that we could have had those live today as well, which would have been awesome. So yeah, thank you very much. We will do that in the future. Is that most people gone? Steve, I'm just going to pop you out. Oh, he's gone. Jay, I'm just going to pop you out unless you've got any questions for us. Great. Have they gone? Yes, I think that's everybody out. Awesome. Thank you so much, team. How did we think that went?
I reckon on my behalf, a little so-so. I'm sorry about not getting the captions up live. There were some things I was still mastering, so our accessible webinar was less accessible than maybe it should be.
I don't think that was on you, Briar. I think we were meant to ask them that in the first place. I think yeah.